Hi, Francisco.
Hello, hello. Hi, Kathy, David. How are you guys?
Hi, Francisco.
How's everything going? Oh, wait, you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it. Oh, okay.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, okay. I
was just waiting
trying
for
the
the
video and
people.
it's like, why isn't it working?
Oh, because I also have to make you a co-host.
Oh, ooh, okay.
And then you can share your screen or your video.
Okay. Well, we don't have video or screen or slides. And stuff.
Okay. So how we're gonna do it, I'm gonna do a little intro about the show, what the lasers are for, then I'll do an introduction about myself. Then we'll pass that on to David, where he'll go into the sponsors and specifically about you two guys. And then we'll just pass it off to you both.
Okay. Sounds good.
Ooh. Mm. So Francisco, since you don't have any slides, or did you want anything in the background as you and Kathy are talking?
I'm actually in my office, so I mean, if you would like to put something, I mean, I do. It depends on the conversation, but I can bring up at least the landscape architecture young ladies that were in. I see I got that right, Kathy. Young ladies that were in our studio. I actually do have their projects, and I can also bring up the like the sheet that I put together with all the people's names and students and professors, you know, that worked in this collaborative initiative, you know, because it was a trans-border, you know, binational kind of, you know, collaborative project. And we actually had some funding as well for it. So, and that's basically what made it possible. It was a lot of planning before, you know, going down there, you know, and and meeting with the folks from University of Arizona and the Universidad Autónoma de Ciudad Juárez as well. So
yeah, that'd be great. David is gonna do a little slideshow of all of our sponsors.
okay.
And then once that's done, then we could switch and you can share your screen and then we can do it from there.
All right.
Okay.
I do think everybody's here.
You want to get started?
Sure. Yep. Are you going to start? You're going to start, right, Bianca?
Mhm. Do you want to show your pretty
Yes.
face?
Just doing that.
Okay. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. So hello and welcome everyone to the fourth installment of our laser webinar series brought to you by our sponsors and grants provided by the fantastic work of Andrea Pauly, Amy Pilling, and Emily Bartz. These talks allow us to convert all those who participated in this spectacular exhibition in place, future artifacts, and remembrance on the El Camino Real, Tierra de Adviento. This show is currently being shown at the Santa Fe Art Institute in Santa Fe. The last day for this show would be on the 28th of May. So if you have any information that you need from us, please let us know right away. My name is Bianca Camarillo. I'm a first generation graduate student from Brownsville, Texas. Currently, I am pursuing my master's in museum studies for curation at UNM. With 6+ years of experience working in the museum field and community work, I am the museum specialist of the team. Along with curating and designing this exhibition through 3D modeling, I am also the lead preparator and art handler. So I'm gonna pass the mic to our other curator, David Sink.
Hi, everyone. My name is David Sank, and I'm the exhibition specialist for SciArt Santa Fe and STEAM New Mexico at the College of Fine Arts, University of New Mexico. In place future artifacts and remembrance on El Camino Real de Tierra Adentro. The show encourages dialogue on the relationships of art and science to monuments and other historic artifacts and representation through the lens of land use, colonization, climate change, extractive tech, industries, and community. Our producing sponsor is SciArt Santa Fe. SciArt Santa Fe is a 501c3 nonprofit that serves community members interested in art science, highlights the long history and rich presence of art science within Santa Fe, and helps to further Santa Fe's role as an international hub for art science. So here are some of our other organizations that we're affiliated with and made this possible. STEAM New Mexico, AmeriCorps Vista, UNM Fine Arts, and Mesa del Sol. This presentation is made possible with the generous support of the Department of Cultural Affairs in New Mexico, the National Endowment for the Arts, and the New Mexico Arts. Any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this program do not necessarily represent those of our funders. Our presenting sponsor is Santa Fe Art Institute. Santa Fe Art Institute is an independent arts organization forging critical inquiry and cultural exchange among artists, creative practitioners, and the broader community. And this is our laser talk. Leonardo, and it's part of Leonardo International Society for the Arts, Sciences, and Technology. Leonardo fosters transformation at the nexus of art, science, and technology because complex problems require creative solutions. We are now streaming on YouTube, and please feel free to subscribe to our channel at SciArt Santa Fe. And if you enjoy and would like to see more of these presentations, please donate and join our Patreon channel at SciArt Santa Fe. I'm going to introduce our talk for today, which is the Bordear Studio. And this is a site located between Ciudad Juarez and El Paso and a tangle of highways, ditches, no man's lands, and degraded riparian zones. The studio sought to envision a new life with deep historical connections to an area with a problematic past and difficult infrastructural realities. The studio operated in partnership with the University of Arizona and the Universidad Autónoma de Ciudad Juarez. I would like to introduce Kathy Kambic and Francisco Uvina, our speakers, professors at the University of New Mexico School of Architecture and Planning. Kathy Kambic is one of our assistant professors in landscape architecture, and Francisco Uvina is our director of historic preservation at the University of New Mexico.
Thank you for having me.
So, can you guys hear me? Yes, okay. So, can I have, are you gonna take down the screen, David? Oh, there you go, okay. So, okay, do you have to show my image or no, or my video?
You should be able to share your screen.
Let's see, okay, now, okay. Now I can see myself.
There you go.
How are you guys doing? Mm-hmm.
Great. How are you?
Good, thank you. So first of all, should I get it started, Kathy?
Yes, please do.
Okay, so basically just like David had explained, this was a studio that took place last semester, was fall 2021, sorry. It's like my time span. It's been a really long week for me, but it was basically an LA studio that we allowed architecture students to join. So we had 3 LA young ladies that were part of the studio, and the rest were actually architecture students. I believe it was 9. Yes, Kathy, 9 architecture and 3 landscape. Is that right? Sort of?
Yes.
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 And so the only project that I have, and it's actually not the completed project, it was like the mid-review type project, is from the young ladies that, the LA young ladies, Emily Ontiveros, Hollis, remind me, my brain is—
Hollis
Moore.
and Leah Greaser.
And Leah Greaser, yes, thank you, Kathy, for refreshing my memory. And so the other thing one of the things that I can show you also, just like you were talking about the sponsorships as well, David, we actually also were able to do this in a collaboration between, like you mentioned, the University of Arizona and the Universidad Autónoma de Ciudad Juárez, we wanted to make it into a binational collaboration, especially because, I mean, El Camino Real de Tierra Adentro is that, you know, which is, it basically connects both countries now. In the past, there was no countries, no territories, well, somewhat, but not like nowadays, like today. And we were dealing with a very difficult site because there is a border fence there, which is not welcoming at all. And then there's basically a ditch where the Texas, I guess the state of Texas basically pulls the water in and drains basically the river and basically hugs the water and doesn't really allow it to flow. So there's been a lot of contamination. So one thing is disputed land when it comes to the, you know, the river being really dirty, the water that's flowing as well, because I mean, it's coming down from, you know, the farmlands in New Mexico, and then even all the way up to this region as well. So a lot of people dump a lot of things into the river, and then Ciudad Juárez doesn't get the best of it, or El Paso. So I don't know if I'm able to share the screen, Kathy, if you want to, you know, jump in and continue with it, so I can show you sort of like the context, David, that you talked about. So I have it open on Google Earth, and I'm not really sure if I can open it or not. And then we can maybe, so that people that are present can actually see the, let me see if this actually will work, screen 2. What are you guys seeing?
Google.
Google? Okay.
We can see your screen.
Okay, perfect. So the Google screen basically is showing you, this is like the territory, you know, where it says Donovan Park. Right here, these are the barracks. That is the first Fort Bliss site. Back in the day when the border was basically created, it was more extensive back in the day. These are the only 2 buildings remaining. Can you see my cursor as well? Yes, okay. So these are the only 2 Fort Bliss buildings that remain, which are not really part of the area that we were focusing in. And why we were focusing on this area, where it's actually the hacienda, used to be a restaurant. It used to be part of a Hart's mill, or a mill of the Hart's family. And the mill no longer exists. But back in the day, you can basically imagine the amount of water that was set aside in order to basically move the wheels, you know, the wooden wheels, you know, to grind wheat at the time, maybe corn. I'm not really sure about that. But the Fort Bliss sites, you know, which is a 2-story, and you'll see it, you know, in the I have another slide where you'll basically get to see them. They're actually like a 3-story adobe buildings, believe it or not, like full adobe, you know, big thick walls. That were basically the barracks for the soldiers that were stationed in the old first site of the Fort Bliss. It is now on the extreme west side of El Paso. So and then, but while we were working on this project, Abara, or the Abara House, which is a nonprofit in El Paso, purchased about half of the property. And they purchased apartment buildings. They couldn't purchase the barracks because the owners wouldn't sell it to them. But they basically, we then had a client, you know, had a client that we basically were working with, yes? So, so they created a program for us, you know, for the interior spaces of the Hacienda restaurant, or what used to be the restaurant. So everything was abandoned, and it's still pretty much abandoned, you know, even to this date. So, but now that they actually own the property and the site, we basically presented to them, and also to our funders as well, which is basically the National Park Service, you know, the Southwest Border Protection, Research Protection. I forget the full name of it. Do you recall, Kathy?
No, I don't, but I do recall that it's the National Trails Office, and the people that we were working with were pretty extraordinary who came out of that office, giving us insight into the kind of broader history of the site.
Yes, and then part of this grant that we obtained, Bianca and David, was like the third phase, because if we would have done the whole thing at once, it would have been way too expensive. So they decided to break it up into different phases. For the first phase, it was Amaterra that worked on a wonderful document, basically researching bibliographies and researching the histories of the site. And then the second phase, which was ongoing, while we were working on the project, was basically to do a historical structures report, an HSR, and then also a cultural landscape report as well, since that was Paleo West working on that project. And their partner, or the people that actually got the funding, was the El Paso County that basically had the resources for the funding. So our project was to go in there and re-envision the site and the border and the river and the many aspects of this part of it, connecting it to the larger context, as you can see on the on this map. So we basically connected it to UTEP, which is basically, you can see it there, that's UTEP, which is the University of Texas El Paso, and then also to Juarez as well, which you can see the density in here. One of the interesting things, in Juarez, even though there's a lot of density, none of these sites are historic. However, you can actually see where the Acequia Madre still lies, and the Acequia Madre has been there since the colonial days. And if you follow the Acequia Madre, which we did when we were down there, you can basically follow it all the way to basically the downtown or the main plaza, or close to the main plaza of Ciudad Juarez. So that aspect of it is still there when it comes to the colonial aspects or the colonial elements that still remain. Nothing really remained on the El Paso side. Historically speaking, the buildings, are still there, but none of the colonial sites. Maybe the house, if it was actually added on, and it was there before the American invasion of the territory, or the Mexican territory. So, and like I said, the Rio Grande, we were dealing with many issues on site. So if you want me to, Kathy, I can start showing some of the slides that the young ladies, the LA ladies basically produce, and maybe you can jump in and maybe talk a little bit about their specific project. How's that?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay, let me see. Let me stop sharing here, and then let me go to the.
I may lose signal, and if I do, I apologize, and I'll just come back in as soon as I can. But I would start just by saying that, noticing that shape in the river, that S curve right at the site, is really important, I think, because this place was formerly wetlands a couple hundred years ago. It was a place where the river got shallow. It was easier to cross, not only for people, but livestock, wagons, kind of the whole deal, which made it a place really important for the Camino Real. It's really the place where the Camino hooks up with the Rio Grande and starts moving north. And so I think that there was a lot of interest from the students, especially the architecture students who hadn't thought about these things as much, to think about what it meant to engage with the river, and to think about this border crossing as something that maybe was able to break down these preconceived notions of nationality or definitive differences between countries. And so the water itself became a really important part, I think, of all the projects. And so in this slide, you can see a plan and 2 sections for a project that actually engaged with the international dam that it exists and is the dam that pushes water into the Acequia Madre going into Ciudad Juarez. And they created spaces not only to be at the river's edge, but to engage with that dam, to walk over the dam proper, and then engage with the Acequia Madre. So you got this kind of multi-piece experience as you moved across this piece of infrastructure that let you more deeply understand the larger scale of moving water through the Rio Grande and around these cities. They also did a lot of work thinking about those riparian zones, how to repair the river's edge. And there was a lot of replanting that happened, and Ibarra House, interestingly enough, wanted to have access to the river. That was one of their sort of ideal program elements for the future, was to have a way for people to encounter the river directly. So even making pathways to bring people down to the river's edge, to clean the water, to make it safe for people to be there, for it to smell good, for it to look clean, hopefully actually be clean, was a really important part of this particular project, but in some ways part of all of the projects that the studio was engaged in. So you can see, oh, go ahead, Francisco.
No, keep going. You're good.
Well, I'm just trying to see, you can see these different shade structures that were created in order to allow people to occupy the top of the dam and to actually extend that space so people could really to look down, look across, look out, and really get all these different perspectives of the river.
So what are you looking at right now, Kathy? Can you guys tell me?
I see a section with a detailed plan with blue on it.
There's water infrastructure and stormwater irrigation.
Yes, okay. I see it. Okay, give me 1 second. Let me. The other aspect of it as well, which I think Ibarra really enjoyed and liked, was that during the site analysis, all the groups basically divided the work, and especially these young landscape architecture ladies, looked a lot into the local vegetation back in the day, and they basically were trying to bring a lot of that back as well. But they also looked at a lot of the early indigenous cultures, of this area and this region, before the colonizers, took it over and basically displaced them, or they just mixed into the population, which were the early indigenous people that are known in this area. They used to call them los mansos, or the peaceful ones. They were not warrior-like, and they eventually basically not disappear, but they basically mix eventually into the population. So are you still seeing the floor plan, Kathleen, with the water?
Now it looks like the bridging ecologies slide.
Bridging slide, okay. So not the water infrastructure, the bridge. Okay, yes. So do you want to explain what they actually did, in basically using the existing infrastructure?
Sure. Yeah. So one of the things they tried to do was think about it on a system scale. So really starting from Elephant View Reservoir that you can see at the top of the slide there, and moving further south to the reclamation facility, the arroyo drainages, stormwater retention. All of these things are feeding into the river, different volumes of water, different times of year for irrigation use, for urban use, municipal use. And, the interesting thing is, reclamation is a pretty interesting word, this idea of reclaiming water from a river so it's not, quote, wasted. But one of the things that's helpful to think about is that these reclamation facilities now can actually help keep rivers alive by moving water through them. The stormwater retention is a way to allow water to infiltrate, to keep the water table a little bit higher, to help keep the river healthy, and then maintaining arroyo drainages in a way that don't erode really terribly is also a way to help keep rivers healthier, kind of downstream, so you don't get these huge volumes of water flooding. And so at the bottom of the image, you can see this kind of beautiful seasonal section thinking about when the water's low in the spring and in the early spring, and then late spring when the irrigation year starts, the water starts to fill the river back up. Hopefully, although this doesn't happen every year, it may not happen this year, there's more continuous water levels moving through the river. So maybe flooding, but at least not totally dry. And then as the year starts to end into September and October, you have those water levels dropping again. So, and if you can slide down a little bit, Francisco, we could see that the rest of that seasonal flows diagram, or maybe it's on there, but that might help explain it as well a little bit, how the water moves around. It's a very low amount of water that El Paso and Juarez are receiving. They receive about 10 inches of rain a year, so that's very, very low. So using the water in the river wisely is extremely important for municipal and irrigation use. And so it was interesting to think about these ecologies, to think about this ebb and flow of water volume, of opportunity for plants and animals to occupy the river zone, the riparian zone, matched with the socio-cultural history of this place, and think about how literally the water being there, the wetlands being there, made all of the cultural things that happened there possible. The fact that people could cross there through the wetlands, the fact that the water was really clean there, that it was consistently moving through, that people could pull acequias off, allowed the cities to grow. So you can't really separate the ecology from the cultural history of this place. So yeah, if you look a little closer at the seasonal flows diagram, you can see how the volumes kind of rise and then drop, and this becomes a yearly cycle. Did you want to add anything, Francisco?
Let me see if I can get to the final, I think that this is, can you guys see this plan here?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So basically this is, a lot of it is like the final design, or at least what they had actually produced like at the midterm project. And let me see if I actually have another one. Give me 1 second here. 1 second.
I just want to let our guests know, if you have any questions at any time that you might want to ask Francisco or Kathy at the end, there's a Q&A box at the bottom, so you're more than welcome to fill out your questions.
One of the things that really captured my attention, and while we were working, especially with this group of the 3 young ladies, was that it really started to become more of a Moorish type of garden. And actually, I will show you in a minute, basically the final sheet, that is now hanging basically because we actually had the landscape architecture accreditation recently. And their projects were selected, so they were put up along with the model that you guys have now in the Santa Fe Art Institute. So there was a lot of work that was done by all the students, not just them. But what is really intriguing is the way that, because they are landscape architects, is how they basically modeled, especially when it comes to the water, with the Alhambra in Spain or in Granada. So they really started to create these amazing spaces that recreated these types of Moorish gardens that were very important for them, for their project, but also for the region, and the influence that the Moorish architecture or Arabic architecture had on Spanish architecture and bringing it to the New World. Like, for example, acequia, and acequia is basically an Arabic word that a lot of people probably don't know this, or maybe they don't even know what an acequia is. So an acequia is basically an irrigation ditch or canal, that basically is used to funnel water into agricultural fields. So there is the acequia madre on the Juarez side. So they kind of wanted to basically bring that idea back of using the acequia system, and then really trying to, like Kathy was mentioning, trying to capture as much of the water as possible coming off from the roofs, and not just from the roofs, but from the side, and also from neighboring watersheds that would eventually come into the property and eventually, basically empty into the river. So they basically created all these types of sections and sectional drawings, as you can see here, of capturing the moisture and the water, as you can see in that lower sectional drawing that you can see there. So, want to add anything, Kathy?
Yeah, I guess I would just add that, the way that they used this idea of this water channel, this acequia or rill, or whatever, you can just call it channel 2, was done in multiple ways. So like in this section, it was about bringing the water kind of across the contour, the slope of the land, so that it would infiltrate and it would help grow these layered gardens going down towards the river. Versus I think the courtyard that you were talking about, Francisco, which really was a very formal space, like an orchard, but even more formal with paving, where you would have these very beautiful thin channels of water delivering water to the trees. And then they had naturalized areas that had fewer channels, but they were still sloped to allow the water kind of spread across when there was water available. So it was really a study of how
You're breaking up, Kathy.
to different types of garden spaces.
Yeah, and let me see. Let me go to page 2. No, it's not 2. 4. This one here, and this one basically is the complete design, as you can see here. Okay, so, and then you'll see the river down below, and then basically what they created, like a series of these gardens, where water would actually flow from the rooftops. The number 1 is basically La Hacienda. That's what it was called, at least the restaurant. But it used to be part of the Hart's Mill, the family that
Francisco,
Can you hear me?
I don't think this, there it is. Okay, sorry, go ahead. Yes, the slide hadn't moved, but now it's good.
Okay. Sorry about that, Kathy. So wait, can you see it, Bianca, David? Yes? Okay. So basically, this is like the legend of all the components, of the final design. And it wasn't just, the landscape architecture ladies. I mean, we also had other amazing projects from the architecture students as well. So when we first started, one of the first things that we wanted to do is to create a design of a bridge. So what they decided to do with their project is basically to use the existing infrastructure of this dam that is basically already there and located. So, I mean, not wanting to, interrupt or be invasive when it came to the, to putting more infrastructure where there's already like a huge fence there. So they basically took it on their own to basically take the existing infrastructure and make it into a pedestrian bridge, as you can see in the other slides. But this one, what they were trying to do is, keep it as minimal as possible when it came to crossing the border. However, we had other ones that were actually quite amazing, especially the architecture students. So that was the first part of our project, the UNM student projects. Other students, like from U of A, basically eventually moved into a bridge type project as well towards the after the mid review. So we first went down there and met with the students from the Universidad de Juárez, University of Arizona, and then also UNM students. We basically stayed in the El Paso area, and we spent the whole weekend there documenting the site, meeting with Abara House, which were now our clients, and then also with the professors from Ciudad Juárez once we crossed the border. We actually did take a walk across the border, and we explored, the other side of the El Camino Real, and also with the Acequia. We followed the Acequia all the way to close to the downtown plaza. So, and then, so yeah, I don't have the other projects, that were submitted, but also the students from Ciudad Juárez also created their own projects, but mainly focusing on the Juárez side and how to, bring about the collection of water that runs down the hills, into the river, and how to make those collections as well. One of the interesting projects that I remember and recall is them basically doing like a bridge or mound of earth, coming all the way to the border and basically allowing the river to flow, underground, so that they basically could merge the two countries together and eventually, of course, eliminate the border wall. I don't think we need that, or the border fence. So that one was a really eye-catching project that I really enjoyed seeing from one of the graduate students from Ciudad Juárez, from the Autónoma in Ciudad Juárez. So do you want to jump in, Kathy?
Sure, yeah. I think one of the more regional concepts that was connected to this project, and I think one or two of the other projects we had, was this idea of the bike paths and bike trails connecting from the Franklin Mountains to the north of El Paso, through and across the border and up into the mountains surrounding Ciudad Juárez, and thinking about this project as something that would connect people through all kinds of activities, not just people who would come see families, maybe on the bridge. And I think actually, Francisco, it might be really great to talk about Damian and Marisa and Brianna's project specifically in terms of how they thought about people meeting on the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that was really cool about the bike trails and everything was that we saw a lot of people riding in Ciudad Juárez, way more than we actually saw in El Paso. But we could, after talking with the students, they were explaining that there's like 100 miles of trail, and people are always moving through this, where we were, which was a very busy street, a very busy road intersection with 4 lanes and roundabouts, up into the mountains and then back down into the city. So it was a really cool opportunity to connect something that I think is still a little bit unusual when we think about border crossings. But did you want to, okay, so back to, and this is the word that I am forgetting. I think it was encounters. I can't remember the Spanish word that they used, but this idea of encounter and seeing family. Sorry?
Encuentro, maybe. I think that.
Encuentro, yes, that was it. Thank you. I think I'm breaking up a little. I don't know if you want to take over for a moment, Francisco.
Yes. So basically, the first project, or it was basically to create a pedestrian bridge. That was like I mentioned before. And the one that the project that Kathy is talking about is Damian Garduño, Brianna Horvath, and Marisa Trujillo. They basically created this amazing pedestrian bridge, but basically the bridge also became like a hub where people could meet in the center, but not be able to cross the border, but just to meet. And it takes place throughout the border region where there is a fence up where people come and gather, have picnics, meet family members, but they can touch themselves, they can feed each other, they can share things, they can, pass things through, these slender pieces of steel. And that also, I think, was one of the things that the students wanted to bring about and basically try to bring these family reunions together at this border crossing, point, yes, of these pedestrian bridges. The other thing that Kathy mentioned, that on the Juarez side, there's a lot of recreation spaces and parks. And according to the students, because it is very, very dense on the Juarez side, that on weekends, this strip along the river is just filled with people, playing football, soccer, football, but also riding bikes. And I think that became a key element for us as well while designing these bridges, so that we can probably make a connection to UTEP. So then we started to think about how the students, because there's a lot of students in Ciudad Juarez that basically go to UTEP and into a lot of the academic institutions in the El Paso side. So how do we get these students to, cross these pedestrian bridges, using their bikes? So the bicycle trails became very key when it came to, especially to connecting it to UTEP and basically students that wanted to ride their bikes, to school or to the university, and vice versa as well. So, but that was one of the key issues when it came to the design of the Juarez side, yes, because there was so many public spaces along the border region compared to on the El Paso side, which is basically composed mainly of highways and infrastructure. There's hardly any housing there. Once you start to move away from the border, that's when you actually start to see the housing, and of course UTEP, the academic institution, there as well. But it's a huge juxtaposition of densities, when it comes to the urban centers or the urban fabric of both cities, especially along the edge of the border that will eventually lead us into the downtowns, which actually are not that far from this specific site. So do you want to continue at all there?
Sure. Yeah. I would agree. I think the project that Scott Striegel and Ryan Jenny worked on for the first part, especially the bridging part, made a really specific gesture to UTEP to connect students across, again, like all of this really large scale infrastructure of bridges and railroad tracks and detention ponds. And I think what was interesting is it was done in a way that wasn't just about having some simple access across, but ways to protect the pedestrian or the cyclist, but also give them views to the different places that they're heading, so that it felt more of an event, it felt more engaged, rather than just pass through, where you might be.
You're breaking up, Kathy. I can take over if you want me to. Kathy, you want me to take over? You were breaking up a bit there. you were talking about Scott's project, and the other thing that, you know, when the first part of the semester, you know, was taking place, they were basically just focusing on this pedestrian bridge. I mean, of course, you know, also on the context of both sides of the border, but we weren't really focusing it on the site or the specifics, the specificity of the site. It was basically on this in the second part of the semester that we started to tackle the site and the programmatic issues, functionality that basically the Abara House was seeking. So that's when we really started to focus more on that. However, during the bridge aspect of it, the students basically had to resolve a lot of issues when it came to the topography. And then also another key issue, and a lot of people don't really think about this, is how to get the Border Patrol still being able to do their rounds along the border edge, which was something that, I mean, we would have just eliminated it, but we needed to be realistic about the border situation now when it comes to this Oñate crossing path or the El Camino Real de Tierra Adentro. And we needed to accommodate them. So there was a lot of, you can actually see it in this slide. Give me 1 second here. Not that one. Not that one. Give me a second. Let's see if I can find it. So which one is this? Page 3. Can you see the page 3 or no? It's called Pedestrian Bridge Connecting People to Place.
I see you're on page 4.
Or okay, so give me 1 second. Let me see if I can find it. Let me close this up. This is page 1. Give me 1 second. Page. Well, I'm not going to be able to find it, so give me a second here. So,
That's okay.
yeah, so basically, one of the things that, you know, had, and they basically, because they had a section of it, you know, with the Border Patrol, it was like a tunnel that they basically created next to the channel, you know, that where the Texans basically remove the water from the river. So then the river basically becomes like this little stream or little trickle of water that flows through, you know, until they're able or willing to irrigate. That's when they close the floodgates, you know, for this dam, small dam, and then they basically will channel the water into the Acequia Madre to irrigate the fields that still exist in Ciudad Juarez, and then other parks as well that they use the water from the Acequia Madre. So are you seeing a poster right now? Yes?
Yeah, it has the University of Arizona, University of New Mexico.
I just wanted to show you this image also because these are the collaborators and the partners that worked on this, you know, I would say very intense semester project. So from the University of New Mexico, University of Arizona, and Universidad Autónoma de Ciudad Juárez, or UACJ, and then the students that worked on their end, and the students from the University of Arizona, and of course our students as well. So so this is what went up, you know, during our exhibit this past semester. Towards the end, I think it was December 3rd, I believe it was, that we basically had like a huge open house. So we invited people from the National Park Service, from the universities as well. We actually recorded, you know, since the University of Arizona students couldn't be here, we had one of our students that's amazing with, you know, his video camera and all kinds of technologies. He basically recorded like all the, they did send us their boards. So we actually had a jury that critiqued their work. And then we eventually, you know, send them the video so they could actually have had or they basically had some feedback on their projects. There's two students that were here from Ciudad Juarez, Ilse and then Leon Felipe. They basically presented their projects, and so we also made copies here at the school. And so it was basically the entire gallery that was full of projects, variety of different projects and variety of different techniques and ideas, especially the creativity that a lot of these students had, was quite amazing. So so this is the poster. The render that you're basically seeing there was actually produced by the three ladies, or actually Leah Greaser from that group, produced this image of looking out from the Hacienda restaurant, what used to be the restaurant or this building, into one of these like Moorish type gardens, as you can see there, with like the palm trees and a lot of the native local species of the trees and when it came to the landscape design. So are you back, Kathy?
I am, yeah. And I wanted to add one thing too about the poster and the name of the studio, this idea of bordear, and we wanted it to be the verbs, not this idea of a static object. Because borders change, they're thick, they're not just one edge, that they're these complex constructions that have so many layers to them, and that when we think about bordering something, it can also mean being adjacent to, being next to, being engaged with. And so I think, as well as engaging with different cultural concepts, ecological and environmental concepts, it was also really important for us to think about how these things knit together. And I think that's why the bridge was such a great project to begin with. And then layer on top of that, the redesign of the hacienda, the creation of gathering spaces, of rehabilitation for the barracks buildings, and thinking about how life kind of comes back to this in a lot of different ways, where things are juxtaposed and brought together and made next to each other. So I know that kind of bounced off your point a little, Francisco, but.
And then thank you for explaining that. The other thing that actually before the bridge, and one of the things that the students did in our studio was basically review a lot of the information that was handed over to us, especially from the folks from the first Amaterra booklet that basically did all kinds of research in this region, in this area. And then also from the people that were working with Paleo West, who were doing the historic structure report and the cultural landscape report. Beautiful sketches that were produced by Steve Burns, who is a former National Parks Trail employee. So he did an amazing evolution or chronology of how the river might have looked back in the day, back even before the first settlers started to come across this path or this region. So it was basically a huge site analysis. We divided it into different segments or sectors, and each one basically took it upon themselves to create this amazing site analysis, which was basically I would say like the first 3-4 weeks, Kathy, of the studio that this took place. Yes.
And actually, I was just looking at the questions, and I think that begins to answer the first question. We, just to kind of get to some of the nitty gritty in that question, we didn't do interviews with historians down in El Paso or Ciudad Juarez. We depended on the previous reports for that. We did get information from the Park Service and the Trails Office, but we didn't really have time to do our own sort of original source research with archival maps per se. They did use like the map library at the University of Texas, the Perry Castaneda Library, which is a fantastic resource, and some other library resources for maps. But it wasn't, I mean, we did have to depend on the work of other people. We had been, you know, these other two reports were pretty extensive, so we didn't really feel like we needed to reinvent the wheel and begin our own research kind of from scratch again. In terms of discrepancies of who owned or stored the information, we didn't actually come across a lot of discrepancies. And I think that Francisco's point about Steve Burns's work was important, because his sketches were super, super helpful in terms of determining physical locations of things. And I think if I scroll down to maybe the fifth question or so, where it asks about where is the Oñate crossing and where is the original Camino. The Oñate crossing and the Camino actually happened in that sort of wetland zone. So there's not just like one single path, but rather it was kind of like a, I don't know, 100-meter sort of wide zone that people could move through, animals, all sorts of things. It wasn't kind of a singular path like we might think a trail is, but rather it was almost like a boulevard of space that people could cross the river, but it was there at that S-curve.
Let me jump in also, because I mean, there's another question here about the acequias, you know, that yes, we have them all over New Mexico, especially in the northern part of New Mexico, but remember that the acequias were basically, you know, basically started back into like in the Mesoamerican, you know, region and area when the first settlers, you know, basically started to inhabit that area and those spaces. And then they basically, so you still see a lot of acequias throughout Mexico, especially in the northern regions as well. They might not have the same structure now. Maybe some communities do, but not all of them like they do. And they're really intact in northern New Mexico with the mayordomo system. I don't know if you guys understand that, but the mayordomo system, there was two types of mayordomos or caretakers. There was some that for the acequias and then some for the churches as well. So they basically became like the caretakers, the ones that would manage or control who would be using the water next. You know, if there was drought, maybe they would only allow it to be used every so often. So basically they became like the regulators of the flow of the water, you know, from the acequia systems especially in northern New Mexico. And the acequia madre, basically, I would say, was there even before any of the acequias here in northern New Mexico. So we also have an acequia madre, for example, in Santa Fe as well. So the acequia madres is basically the mother ditch, yes? And that's the one that feeds all the other veins, you know, of this, los regadíos, you know, that basically distribute the water. So just for that person that had a question about, you know, about the acequia communities, yes? So, but however, Ciudad Juárez, if you can imagine back in the day, was a small town, a very tiny town, yes, with a small plaza, with a small adobe church, and now it's a huge mega metropolis, you know, with El Paso adding more population to it. So that whole region now, it's probably composed of over maybe close to 3.5 million people. So from a small community of El Paso del Norte, or the path to the north, you know, back in the day, is now a huge mega city. And I think Kathy is correct when it comes to the El Camino Real. Why they crossed there? It's because there was probably like the lowest wetland there. And that's where they basically called it the path to the north, El Paso del Norte. And that was the original name for Ciudad Juárez. And they eventually, once the border was drawn, they basically created two El Pasos. El Paso del Norte and El Paso, Texas. So in 1877, they decided to name it Juarez, and basically, naming it after Benito Juarez, the president who had been there settling during the move to the north, to the extreme north when the French invaded Mexico, at the 1860s. I can't recall the exact date when the French invaded Mexico. So Benito Juarez, the president, the only indigenous president, fled north and basically established the government in Ciudad Juarez. So Ciudad Juarez, or El Paso del Norte, became the capital city of Mexico for at least close to a year or so, until he basically eventually moved down to Chihuahua City. So that's a big part of the history of this region and the border region. The other part of the history in this border was basically the Treaty of El Chamizal. And the Treaty of Chamizal, took place in the 1970s, maybe 73, I can't recall if it was 73 or 63, but it was when the two Mexican, or the Mexican president and the US president basically met at the border and basically gave land back to each other because the river had meandered, and basically some of the properties, in the El Paso were on the Mexican side, and then vice versa. Some of the Mexican property was on the US side. So they basically did a swap of land, and then eventually Juarez basically created a huge park that is now called El Parque Chamizal, or the Chamizal Park. So all these historical findings and research was basically taken by the students and basically created a series of slides or a manuscript or a booklet that were presented down in El Paso when we were down there, meeting with the other students from the other universities as well, and then also presenting it to the Abara House. So the other component that I haven't talked about, or Kathy, maybe you can jump in here, is that part of the grant and part of what we had, or had promised to put together, was a publication of the student work. So that right now it's being developed by two students, which is Marisa Trujillo and Damian Garduño. Damian had been part of a group in the past that had created an amazing publication that was basically published about 3 semesters ago, maybe, plus or minus. And it was about the firehouse station here at the rail yards in Albuquerque. So right now they're actually working on the publication. It's looking great. You might not have seen it yet, Kathy. You eventually will see it. And but Damian and Marisa are very talented students, and they're actually working with Ilse and Leon Felipe from Ciudad Juarez, from the Autónoma, to actually do the translation. So it's going to be a bilingual publication of all the student work and the research. Not all of it, because we can only afford so much because of the grant. So, but it will be probably like close to 100 or 120 page publication that will be produced in-house. In-house with our students, but it's going to be printed by Hemlock, which is a California state publisher company that basically does all their printing in Canada. So that will be coming soon. I don't know if we're going to be able to have enough of them to sell or distribute, but enough for us to basically complete and close the project up. So there's a lot of these components that are also part of the project. So the project hasn't ended. It still basically continues to evolve into a publication. So so Kathy, I don't know if you want to jump in. I don't know if you got the chance to read the other questions.
Yeah, I would add to that, that the copies of the publication will be shared with the partners that we've been working with, the Trails Office, Abara House, the students at the other universities, so that there starts to build a critical mass around these types of projects. But yeah, I don't know how far and wide we'll be able to get all of the copies. But builds energy, because it was asked, I think, what are the politics of doing work like this? And what reactions have we gotten from local communities? The local community has been really people involved directly with the projects. We haven't been, like, it hasn't gotten to the point, I think, once the book is together, to start to share this information a little bit wider in both cities. I mean, the politics are complicated in one sense, and they're really simple in another. They're simple in the sense that federal government doesn't really have.
You broke up, Kathy.
She's done. Oh, no, she's back.
I can take over. So there's really no small or like rural or community anymore. I mean, we're talking about huge urban centers, and the communities that are still there, for example, the students of Ciudad Juarez, basically, they had more of a community involvement, because I mean, it is a very dense region, the Juarez side. The El Paso side is more of a spread out. There's no, like I said before, there's no housing units close by. So basically the only housing basically, and the only people that are still living there is like a small row of like 4 apartments that the Avara House people, the nonprofit, basically purchased while they took, they basically, and the other difficult thing, when it came to the Avara House, is that there's so many different easements there. We had a very difficult time figuring out, this is like the border region, this is like water utilities, this is so-and-so, and this is this other one. And so it was just understanding the complexities of the border. There are a lot, especially when it comes to the easements or the border wall and the patrolling of the border patrol, and then the channel that flows along the river. So there's all these dynamics that are taking place, and when I talk about the border fence, it's like a 20-foot border fence, that is like solid, like a screen. Yes, that it's, I mean, you can see through it, but it's so invasive into this landscape. Yes, I mean, it's so, it marks this territory and makes it into a really cold space and area. So, and there's no way, I mean, they have these huge doors, but there's no way that you can like flow freely, from through the fence. Yes. So basically that became like a huge obstacle that we basically had to design around it or through it. Yes. So that became one of our major obstacles, I guess, when it came to the design work that we were tackling. So, and then the other thing that I would like to mention is the Avara House people. Their nonprofit basically deals with border issues. They deal with borders all over the world. And Sammy Pascual, I think is his last name, Sammy, who's the director of Avara House, he was like so joyful and so enthusiastic of the student work, like you wouldn't believe. They wanted to basically, they wanted to take the model. I think they actually ended up taking like all the drawings, I believe. Maybe Kathy jumped off, but I think they took, because they were so happy. And Chris, my names, I'm forgetting people. So Chris, basically she's an architect, older lady, but she's an architect. So she also had a lot of feedback to give to the students. And that's one of the things and the key issues here, that we were working with an architect, yes? So that she created programs for the students, to readapt the Hacienda restaurant or the abandoned Hacienda restaurant. But I'm so glad that it was them obtaining this property, because they became the most amazing clients as well. So, and they can't wait for the publication to come out, and they can't wait to get their hands on the model. They would like to take the model, and we offered it to them. And it's basically for all the audience. If you guys have not been there yet, I have not, and, excuse me, David, but the day just flew by and I couldn't make it. I hope to be there next Friday and check out the rest of the exhibit and what you guys, put together for on our end and the student work as well. So, and I do appreciate that from you, David and Bianca, and the people that organize this at the Santa Fe Art Institution. SciArt, yes? Is that the name of it, David? SciArt?
SciArt Santa Fe is the name of the nonprofit. Yeah.
So like Kathy was saying, there was a lot of people involved when it came to the critiquing of the projects, including the National Park Service, that were very strict in how we basically did or interpret the trail. So a lot of the students, when they were actually doing their architectural designs, basically had that in mind. Yes, how do we interpret this trail? It was through museums, exhibits, sculpture gardens, basically to tell the story. If people were crossing a pedestrian bridge, they would understand and be there, reading and understanding the story or the history of El Camino Real de Tierra Adentro, and then the establishment of the Oñate crossing or the path. One of the things that I just wanted to mention about the Oñate path or crossing is that when the students from Juarez were researching that, like the Oñate crossing or the El Paso de Oñate or Cruce de Oñate, they couldn't find anything online. Nothing. They said there was nothing. They couldn't find. The only thing they did find was the document that we were working with. So that was like the only document that the students from the Juarez side, they never even thought that to call it Oñate crossing, which he basically crossed in 1598. And he basically put together this whole settlement, expedition. He basically left Zacatecas, eventually gets together or meets with people in Santa Barbara in Chihuahua, which is a mining town. And then from there, he basically collects everything. So the only thing that he had with him were soldiers and probably their wives of these soldiers. So he brought people together, oxen, cattle, chickens, pigs, whatever, you would take on this like long, trail or path or, or visit. They were settling, they were moving north. And that's why El Paso del Norte, which is now Ciudad Juarez, that's why they called it the path to the north or to the northern territories. So it was like the first time that the, New Spain, basically wanted to settle the northern region. So it took Oñate about several years to convince the Spanish crown that he wanted to explore the northern territories. And that's how we ended up with Santa Fe and a lot of the neighboring communities that were settled in as the first capital cities, and then eventually was moved to the now Santa Fe, that then became the capital. So El Camino Real basically connected capital to capital, which is Mexico City, to basically Santa Fe, although people say that even it went further north, all the way up to Oquehuingue Pueblo as well. So, and so a little bit of history there when it comes to El Camino Real. So, Kathy, I don't know if you want to jump in or you got interrupted?
Oh, hi. I'm so sorry about that. I got completely disconnected. So I don't know how to continue what I was saying, but if there's another question, I'm happy to jump in again.
Basically, if you want to give like any closing comments or, anything you want to relate to us, getting closer towards the end.
Let's see. I guess I would say that I think that this project is a really interesting example of the possibilities of combining landscape architecture, cultural studies, environmental and is a major factor in the way that the Rio Grande is run. There are so many compacts between New Mexico, Texas, the country of Mexico.
You're breaking up Kathy, again. Kathy, you want me to take over?
It takes a while for our responses to come back to her as well.
You're breaking up. So let me follow up on what you're trying to say here. So basically, there's a lot of complex issues when it comes to all these authorities along the border that are being shared by Texas and or El Paso, Texas, and then New Mexico, and as well as Ciudad Juarez or Mexico. So in some cases, Bianca and David and the audience, it goes beyond, the control of Juarez and El Paso. Now you're talking about Washington and Mexico City. Yes, I mean like the national governments, not the regional governments. Yes, even though they are there, they are experiencing it. Yes, it goes beyond it, and I think that the lack of connection from both national capitals or governments, I don't think they understand the dynamics of Ciudad Juarez as a binational. There's a synergy there, that I talk to people about. They feed from each other. Yes, I mean they complement each other. They collaborate with each other. They partner with each other. So one couldn't live without the other. So if El Paso is going through like a huge major economic struggle, people in Juarez will suffer. Yes, especially when it came to the pandemic, or during Trump, for example. I won't go too far, that he became really harsh, on like border, issues, that people stopped coming to El Paso. And so the people that purchase in downtown El Paso are people from Ciudad Juarez. And a lot of people don't really understand that. And then the other thing is also education and academics. Every morning, there's hundreds of students that live in Ciudad Juarez that line up along the border to cross to come to school to the US or to UTEP or to El Paso Community College or to high schools or elementary schools. I mean, there's all this influx of people, that move back and forth. So if you break that, yes, one or the other or both will eventually suffer. So, but all these compacts are very interesting to understand. And that's basically what the students eventually, besides analyzing the older or the historic or the existing indigenous cultures and like the local food resources that were there present many years ago, including vegetation that no longer exists there. Yes, that cypress trees and many other types of, not strange, but, species that no longer exist along the border. So all that was basically documented by the students, in order to eventually bring together all this information that they've collected and eventually put together an amazing, project that a lot of them, really creative, especially when it came to the bridge and the issues on both sides of the border, which are, key and very important. So unless if there's other questions, I don't know, Bianca, if we're coming to the end of it. Or how long do we have? You tell me.
I think you guys pretty much answered the questions that were in the Q&A section. There was a question in the chat of, I believe it was, can you share the Abada House website or link? That way more people can get information about that.
Okay, give me 1 second and I'll find it for you, okay? Let me see if I can actually find the Abada House. Give me 1 second. Abada. Let me see if I can find it. What I can do, Bianca, if you want me, I can find it and let me see if I.
You can just email it to me if you'd like, and then I can share it.
I'll email it to you, and then you can share with the participants that are here today. They're an amazing nonprofit, and like I said, Sammy Pasquale or Pasquale, he basically was born in Jordan, and he saw this space and this place as like the Abada House. He really wanted to make that a specific point or an important part of the border. And actually Abada, I think, means ford it means several things, but this is in Arabic, I think, or no, in Hebrew, mainly it means, I think, ford. And Kathy, please jump in if I'm, not correct on this, but what Abada actually means, the word. So, but Sammy as a collaborator, and then Kim was the architect that I was mentioning to you earlier. They were both very instrumental and really gave amazing ideas to our students, because now they were our clients, which was even more fun because at least we had a purpose, in designing a lot of these spaces. And we don't know if they're ever gonna be, made into a reality, but at least now we know that there's people that care for the site and this project, for the long run as well. So I don't know if you want to add anything to it, Kathy. So they were asking for the Abada House website, which I don't have, but let me look for it. You guys keep chatting away, and then I'll give you a minute, okay?
Sure, yeah. So Abara is just spelled A-A-R-A to begin with.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Bianca. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I just wanted to thank you and Francisco, especially for being able to join us today, and the work that you have done, with this project has gotten such great feedback here at the exhibit. A lot of people look at it, they're admiring, the attention to detail that you guys definitely decided to focus on, and seeing the actual model of El Paso and Juarez, and seeing, the vast amount of space that looks like it's there. But with me, like, since I've been to that area, knowing that it's pretty isolated, so the fact that we've been getting such great feedback about the model and about the purpose of the model it's been really amazing.
It was a lot of work, that's for sure,
It definitely looks like it.
And we're still continuing. And I think that one of the most difficult things was also collaborating, and not the collaboration part, but the initial meetings that were held, through Zoom, with all the university like collaborators and academics. And that I think was one of the most perhaps difficult things, because remember, we basically obtained this funding pre-pandemic. So we couldn't really do much for like almost 2 years. And we kept planning for it, canceling it, planning for it, canceling it, until we were able to basically, bring it all together. And then I think it was for the best of things. You don't think, Kathy, because of now we actually even had a client that purchased a property while we were still working on it. So, and then all of a sudden they became our clients. And that was like the most beautiful thing that happened when we were working on this initiative. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I would totally agree. And I just want to say thank you to all of you, Bianca, David, Andrea, for inviting us to be a part of this SciArt exhibition and supporting our work as well. It's just been a really lovely project to work on with these students. We're so glad we could be included in another conversation, a larger conversation. So thank you.
And I hope to work with you in the future as well, Kathy.
Oh, Francisco, absolutely, yes.
So yes. So unless you both have questions for us, then I think we're pretty much done. Unless we, so you tell us.
I'm just going to share with everyone our next laser talk, which is on Thursday, May 26th at 6 p.m. And it's Memorial, Anti-Memorial, which is also another studio in it's in the Landscape Architecture Department. And I'm just going to read a brief description here about the studio. Memorials have long been sites of collective memory, commemoration, and historical reference. Although often described as apolitical, the act of choosing a particular memorial to be built within a particular location is by its very nature political. Who decides who or what should be memorialized? What narrative will be shared? Where will it be located? And who will have access to it? And so that is our next laser, and our final laser is Chico McMurtry, who's going to be actually who's right next to this project, and I think it's a great juxtaposition. His work is the border crossers, and it's actually he's designed and constructed these robots that cross borders and create that connection between the US and Mexico.
Just to also mention, there is another laser tomorrow. That's going to be in person. If any of the audience members wants to go or get any more information, it's Exploring the Unknown with Cheryl Crow and Patricia Watts. That's going to be here at Vital Spaces, here at the SFAI campus. We have the information in the comments in case you want to find out more about it. If anything, it's just like this laser, it's free. You got any other information,
we have two exhibitions going on actually at the Midtown campus in Santa Fe right now. And they're both SciArts related, and it's called Beneath the Surface. And it's looking at art and science research projects. So Francisco and Kathy, if you guys can make it up before on next Friday, we'd be happy to give you a tour. And anyone else who's still here with us.
Thank you so much.
I'm sorry.
You're breaking up, Kathy, again.
I just wanted to repeat that for you guys and who's ever here listening to us, we're available. We're streaming right now on YouTube Live. And after we complete this laser talk, you can watch all of the laser talks that we've had so far, and subscribe to SciArt Santa Fe on YouTube.
So
And
thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you, David. Thank you, Francisco, Kathy,
Thank you,
Andrea, Amy,
guys.
all those that have been involved. So see you
Have a
next
great
time.
evening.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care.